Today I'm going to be installing an AEM AFR gauge on the old Falcon. You have to excuse the rain, it's a bit loud in the shed when it rains. So I got this gauge just to see how accurate my tuning of my Holly 4150750 carb is. I think I need to change the jets out. I think it's running a little bit rich at idle, and I don't know what it's running wide open throttle, so we'll see how it goes with this gauge. Now, I read some reviews online and I heard that this one's pretty good, so got it from Coupe Australia, and I ordered it online and it got shipped within 3 days, which is pretty impressive, so I would highly recommend Coupe Australia. So let's have a look. I've cut it open. So first of all, got the gauge, which looks pretty good. It's a shallow gauge, so it's a 52mm gauge, but it's quite shallow in the backing. So when I mount it properly, it should be a lot easier to mount. So that's the gauge itself. If you look at the other end, so a nice sticker to add to the cabinet. AEM products, instructions, which I'll have to have a read through because there's certain things in regards to mounting it, the distance from the head, distance from the collector, making sure it's far back from the exhaust pipe so you don't get any fresh air scavenging. Get the bung there. So this is a mild steel bung, so I'm going to weld in the bung into just after the collector. That looks like stainless steel, maybe it is mild steel. There you go. So some electrical fittings. Don't know what the lucky band's for, I guess I'll find out, maybe to tie up everything. Probably not, because it's going to be too hot under there. The sensor itself, so this is a Bosch sensor. So I think they call it an L4.9 sensor. I did a bit of reading, but this is a wideband sensor, so you can get a narrow band and a wide band. And the reviews that I've heard, these are pretty good as long as you mount them correctly and you don't allow any fresh air to come in to impact on the result or skew the result. Nice harness there, just plug and play harness. So this must be the main harness, so that would go from the sensor, and then I presume that goes into the back of the gauge. Oh, there's the gauge there, so you've got two little fittings. So that would go into the back of the gauge. And then this is to power everything, so this goes into the back of the gauge, and then you've got, I guess, your ground, your ignition, some others there, because this has the capability for data logging as well, which I may do at a later stage, but you can put in I think it's a 9-pin port, and then you have the ability to log the data, which is good for fine tuning, but I just want to make sure that idle, cruising and wide open throttle are all within the right fuel ratio, so it's not running too rich, but most importantly it's not running lean. And then the back of the gauge. That looks pretty good. So let's get started. So you can see here, this is the collector, or my tri-wire extractors. This is where they meet and then they go into the exhaust. So I'm thinking I will put the oxygen sensor just after where they meet here. Now it says ideally you want it 18 inches from the head, or at least 18 inches, and then you want it as far back from the exhaust as possible. So I'm thinking these are Genie extractors, which I've had for a while. I may upgrade the extractors at some stage, but it doesn't sit right with me to put a sensor into the extractor, so I'm thinking better for the exhaust, and it's going to be a lot easier to put in. I don't want to take that extractor off again after taking it on and off a few times. So what I'm thinking of is I will take this off, take this part of the exhaust off, and then mark out exactly where I want to put the sensor, and it needs to be at least 10 degrees or more. That's the angle. So we'll take this out, and I'm just thinking driver's side versus passenger side. I guess clearance, heat, and where you're going to mount the wiring. So we'll have a look at that. Alright, so I'm thinking about mounting the sensor here on that 10-degree angle, and then I've got room to run up the chassis rail and then attach to the firewall and then in through the firewall grommet. So I'm thinking that, hang this down, thinking that is probably the best spot. So that's the collector, so it needs to be after that. So I could put it a bit closer, but I also need to make sure I've got clearance for the back of the sensor and to get those bolts out. So I think that's going to be the spot. So I've taken a section of the exhaust out and I've marked out where I'm going to put the sensor or the bung, weld in the bung. Now there's a plastic cap on the end of the sensor, so I just removed this, and while I was under the car I just put the cap exactly where I wanted the sensor to go, and the cap's the same size as the bung, and just got a Sharpie and drew around it. So what I'm going to do is I'll drill a pilot hole in the middle, and then I'll take the step drill bit and I'll drill it out, and we'll clean it up to fit the bung ready for welding. So I used the stepped drill bit to drill out the hole for the bung. Unfortunately, that's as far as my step drill bit goes. So it's just slightly too small for the bung. What I'm going to do is just take out a bit of the more of the metal with a die grinder, and I'm thinking because the pipe's actually curved, I might take a little bit off the back of the bung so it's a neat fit when I weld it in, but we'll see how that goes. So I'll take that off and then I'll clean up around the pipe ready for the weld, and then we'll weld the bung in. Alright, so I've cleaned up the hole. I made it bigger. I've also taken off the edges and I just cleaned it up a bit on the inside. So what we do, I also took a bit off the edges of the bung to make it sit more flush. So that's going to sit in there like that. And then I should take it over to the right so you can see that's how it sits. So I'll weld it, but on the inside, that's how it sits. So I think that should be fine. And the angle, so you can see, that's the angle. So it's going to definitely sit more than 10 degrees, probably like 25, 30 degrees, which is fine. So we'll get ready to weld it in. Right, so I've welded the bung on, not my best weld. You can see the discoloration inside of the bung, so it definitely was a stainless steel bung, which I guess has its pros and cons. It won't rust, but mild steel on stainless steel, I probably didn't get the penetration I needed, so I needed to do 2 passes. But it's on there, it's airtight, that's the main thing. So what I'll do is, well, I've sprayed it with a bit of protector for weld, so I'll wait for that to dry and then I'll put it back in the car and we'll start wiring it up. Right, so I got the exhaust pipe in, the bung in and the O2 sensor in, so that's the way that I've routed it. Also put heaps of gasket silicone on the gasket that joins the extractors to the exhaust pipe. It wasn't leaking before, but just want to make sure that there are no leaks that may play havoc with the sensor. So now I'm going to have a look to see how I can mount this wire. Probably go up along maybe the frame rail and then up through the firewall into the car, and then we'll do the gauge. Alright, so I've taken the glove box out, I've fed the wiring loom through for the AFR gauge. This is the end of it. Now, this is my switch panel. When I built the engine that's in the car, I built a test stand for it, and I just made this switch panel just to fire the engine up. Anyway, I got so impatient that I put this in the car, and I was going to do a bit of stainless steel and make a gauge set up, and yeah, I basically just transferred it in and it's been that way ever since. So it's just a J-car setup. You've got the ignition switch there, this runs the MSD box, thermo fans, push start button, and then you got water, oil pressure, volts and tacho. So what I'm going to do is take out this one here and put the AFR gauge down here, and I want to get a better tacho, which I'll probably mount on the steering wheel with a shift indicator light, which is helpful. So I'll take this out and then I'll wire the AFR gauge in. This is just, I was walking around looking in Bunnings and looking at Kmart and the reject shop to make a engine stand test panel, and I thought, well, 52mm gauges, why can't I just get a muffin tray and take the back off and slide the gauges in, and it's worked a treat. So I'll take this out eventually and I'll do something nice, but you know, for getting a car going, it's its own independent ignition system and gauge cluster. Get started. Alright, so I've wired up the sensor, so it's in there down the bottom, or the AFR gauge I should say, and I've just put the tacho up there for now, but I haven't mounted it yet. So this is going to be a completely cold startup, so we'll see how that goes. So hopefully, and I haven't put this back properly, so flick this on. Alright, flick the ignition on, and give a few primes, and starter. Like I said, completely cold. turned my idle right down the other day. I was messing around with it, so I might have to go around and turn the idle back up. Tell here, so that's too lean, pretty sure. So what I'm going to do is change the idle now to 1000 RPM. So 1000 RPM, that's 1000 RPM. What the cam says on the card. So apparently I want to have it at around 14.65. You can see when it warms up it's pretty good. Looking at the manual over here, and it's got here wideband sensing, so idle should be 14.7, 20 is lean, wide open is 10.5, so when it's rich, so adjust this. So my idle's way off. So I'm going to, well, first I'm going to take it up to 1000 RPM, so I'll adjust the idle screw and then I'll change the mix screws. And the way that I did the mixture screws was to get, I adjusted it to get the highest amount of vacuum at idle. So I'll adjust it and we'll have a look at it. So I've adjusted the idle, so the idle is right on 1000. So now it's running just slightly rich, which is good. And even on wide open throttle, well, not wide open, but I'll take it up the revs a bit.